speaker within the academic writing stream. This is Quinn, and she'll be talking about citation behaviour. She has more of an instruction. I'll let her do this. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Quinn and I'm a master's student of applied linguistics. My supervisor is Louisa, and I want to take this chance to say thank you so much for your patience and dedication. It's just imagine how dumb I was at the beginning of the study. So today I'm going to present just a section of my master dissertation. It's a small-scale study on citation behavior of Vietnamese postgraduate students in their university assignments. I would like to start with a little bit of background on the skill of using sources. Using sources properly is a central skill in academic writing, and student needs to consult a lot of source texts, selectively incorporate them in their writing, and also to construct new knowledge claims. Using sources is a very important skill because it first helps the students to support their claims and contextualize their claims in a wider literature. It also helps them to construct their knowledge by critically evaluate and interact with the source text. It also helps them to create a web of knowledge, and which is very easy to retrieve the knowledge claims by using the referencing formatting conventions that suggest the MLA or APA formatting. And lastly, it's also because of a matter of ethical issues. And in Western education, it's very important to credit the originator of knowledge claims, so that's why it's very important. However, it is an important skill, but it is also very hard, and it is a sophisticated literacy skill that student needs to master. The first reason is because each disciplinary community has its own variation in the way that the community convey and discuss the knowledge. So the students are supposed to conform to these conventions. Very hard. And the second point is that citation skill is a very private and occluded skill. What I mean is that, for example, when you look at a final written product, you can never tell the relationship between the cited source text and the original source text. It very much depends on the writer's ethics, knowledge, and also skills. The third point is that this citation skill involves a variety of sub-skills, and it also involves multi-layers of knowledge and skills. For example, to access the information, to evaluate the information, and also to synthesize the information. So the students don't just drop a name at the end of their quoted text, but they also need to interact with the quote meaningfully. This presentation presents part of a bigger project on students' writers' citation behavior. In particular, I would like to present the results and discussion of the following research question: how do students understand the referencing expectations for their assignment and adapt their citation behavior accordingly? So this research question is the first stage when students approach a university assignment. They approach the prompt and they conceptualize this process and what is expected of them. Since this is a small-scale study, I employ 7 Vietnamese students, and I use text-based semi-structured interviews so that I could explore in depth their perceptions and behaviors. So these 7 Vietnamese students at University of Auckland are from different disciplines. They were all in their first year MA coursework, and they have completed their undergraduate level in a Vietnamese institution. And interestingly, they had no experience in a Western education before. The procedure of this study is that, first of all, the students would send me an essay of them. There's one of their select essays ranging from 1,000 to 3,000 words, or with at least 5 references, and graded not lower than B-. Then I will examine these essays prior to the interview. In the interview date, the participants will bring to the interview all of the related documents to their assignment writing. For example, assignment guidelines, course outline, marking guide, or a separate marking sheet from their lecturer, if any. After that, each of them will have a 60-minute individual interview with me. And actually, there's 7 participants sent me 7 essays, which are quite relatively high score. So I think it's quite understandable because, you know, when I give them the criteria for sending me the essays, they would choose the best that they can, to demonstrate how successful they are. And so all of these essays, surprisingly, score above A-. And the result is, the first result, I can see that most of the referencing expectations that I can identify in these, in all of the clues, are implicit requirements. And only a few of them are explicit requirements. What I mean by explicit requirements is the concrete and visible requirements that can be understood, accomplished, and checked in a simple and straightforward way. So basically, the examples of explicit requirements suggest the number of sources. For example, your lecturer requires the student writer to include at least 6 sources. Those would be a very concrete, very explicit requirement that is very easily checked. And implicit requirements includes includes the requirements that result in a variety of interpretations. So comparing explicit and implicit, explicit requirements, basically there's no misunderstanding between lecturer's expectation and student's interpretation. And also there's no variation among the student's interpretations as opposed to in implicit requirements. So please look into your handout because it's quite small font, so that's why I decided to print out this table. As you can see, the first column we have the referencing expectations. This is where the clues of information, the expectation is defined, is identified. For example, from the reading list. And the student interpretation is how the student interpret the expectations from their lecturer. And until strategies, which is their strategies that follows their interpretation. So for example, reading list. Some students mentioned that they have reading lists. And when I asked them how they use the reading list, some students, I think one student said that it's a hint by his lecturer, who has selected and given a list of appropriate sources. So it's basically that student think the lecturer has provided a shortcut to appropriate sources, and he or she, and he actually relied on this reading list as a starting point for his literature search, and also finding the answers to the assignments using this strategy. Another, for example, interpretation. Like another student think that it's just a collection of textbooks and articles dealing with primarily theory issues. So she actually looked for sources elsewhere, but she only cited some basic theories from this reading list. So these are the discussion of implicit requirements. Another student thinks that the reading list is actually just a collection of extra textbooks. And so he only used this reading list for exam purpose only, and he didn't use it for his assignment writing at all. The policy of plagiarism is another clue of expectations that students think is as important in their assignment writing. The first one the two most salient points in this policy of plagiarism and student interpret is that they associate policy of plagiarism with the punitive measures of policy violations and the similarity detection alternate-in. So as long as they are afraid of this policy violations, one student actually credits all of the claims that she made in her assignment. And she thinks that if she cites every sentence in the assignment, it's not plagiarism. Because actually, knowledge is never actually original. She thinks that every single thing she said in the assignment is very much similar to perhaps one big author, big names somewhere. And she tries to look for the similar ideas in an authentic source, and she cites that person in here. And another interpretation is similarity detection. A few students think that similarity is a very big concern for them. So one student thinks that he only resorts to paraphrasing. The other students express their concern of avoiding direct quotations. Or another student tried to collect vocabulary expressions from further readings to avoid using the exact wording from her original sources. Or the marking guide. The wording in the marking guide is also perceived as important for the students. For example, when it's say a good paper should demonstrate ABC, and the student interpret this as demonstrating a breadth of disciplinary knowledge. That's true. And when they adopt it, they think that include as many sources as possible. And another student thinks he is going to create a strong reference list, which is basically also the number of sources and the origin of the sources. For example, from high-profile journals or from famous books, something like that. And the feedback from the lecturer. Some good feedback. The student think that good feedback means the lecturer think he has cited a wide range of credible sources. So he's going to continue focusing on quantity and quality of source origins. But a limited feedback, again, the students think about the quantity of sources at first. First and foremost, their first concern is to cite a larger number of sources in future assignments. So I'm going to discuss these results. First of all, as we can see, the number of implicit referencing expectations is more than explicit expectations, which is quite in line with the subjective characteristics of the use of sources. However, this entails a variety of students' perceptions and behaviors and strategies that are quite misleading. Which brings me to the next point, the classification of developmental and compensatory strategies. Literature in source use has contended that it's very, very difficult to distinguish between developmental strategies and compensatory strategies. Please refer back to your handout on the third column, inter strategies. How many of the student strategy can you surely say that is very developmental and educational? Very few, right? I just pick out, let's say, just one or two in the list that it seems to be a developmental strategy. For example, when the student says he think about marking guide and he situate the paper in a wider literature, this seems to be a good, an educational way of interpreting the expectations and employed strategies. Or another one, for example, the policy of plagiarism. When another student thinks that she is going to collect vocabulary expressions from further readings to avoid similarity detections. It seems to be quite educational as she builds up her own vocabulary bank for her future writing activities. But in fact, again, we don't really know how successful these students are with these strategies, so only from their perceptions. And also, a few others would look like a compensatory strategies. For example, credit all claims. This can result in over-citation. And the students might lose their voice, and they can't construct new claims. They need to have their own stance. But here, it seems like the students lose their identity, lose their voice to other bigger names. Or another one could be avoid direct quotation. This seems to be compensatory because of the good uses of direct quotation, the rhetorical functions of direct quotations that this student might miss in avoiding these direct quotations. So you can see, and the rest of these strategies, very hard to distinguish between developmental and compensatory. For example, citing a larger source here, cite a larger number of sources in future assignments. This could mean the students are aware of expanding their literature search and reading and appear as a wide reader. But also it could mean that the students will inflate the number by name dropping, or perhaps using synthesis, ready-made synthesis from secondary sources, secondary citations. And an interesting finding is that I think we could see that students, we all hope students to develop more developmental strategies over compensatory strategies. But the fact is that regardless of what kind of strategies, these students have been successful in securing a high grade for themselves in their assignment. So I concluded with a few conclusions. So we can see that there are more implicit referencing expectations in their course outlines and a variety of clues. But students, in response to these, to their interpretation and the expectations, develop their own strategies. It could be developmental or it could be compensatory strategies. So I suggest that we might think about the way that lecturers and students communicate in classroom and in their environment, in academic environments, for implicit referencing expectations to be more explicit. For example, the referencing focus could shift from, source breadth to more in-depth. And for example, the lecturer could encourage the students to cite one source but multiple times, then multiple sources but only one time. Because the students still think that as many sources as possible would demonstrate a wider reader instead of keen reader, a more in-depth interaction with the source text. And also, perhaps, for example, another suggestion could be to include the page numbers of books or journal articles to make sure that the students don't just name dropping from a secondary source use. And also, after all, I think the skill of using sources is a very subjective process. So instead of banning or trying to prevent the compensatory strategies, which is quite detrimental, we need to just help them, guide them through this apprenticeship stage of university writing assignments. I think this is a very important stage that most students would have difficulties in before proceeding to other activities, such as thesis writing or journal publishing. Thank you so much for your listening. And
thank you so much, Quinn. I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the audience does too. Can I invite any questions from the audience?